20-minute presentation that you can go and take a look at. We have the video posted at Excel Energy and at EEBC, and it talks about the trends that are happening in the marketplace, all the goals that are being created by the utilities and cities and the state that are driving electrification, and also the beneficial electrification that people hear about. And heat pumps is a big part of those plans for all those organizations. So if you'd like to go back and do that, we have a slide coming up with some of those links, as well as the Colorado Energy Office, the EEBC, worked with to interview utilities, contractors, their distributors, and their manufacturers to identify the top 10 barriers to accelerating heat pump installs in Colorado. And from a lot of the findings in those two groups has really driven the agenda that has been developed for the heat pump action groups within the EEBC, which are designed to be frontline, tackling things that we need to do in the market, in the field, between the whole supply chain that's delivering HVAC and heat pumps. So the 4 priorities that were identified by our group is working together, collaborating on the forecast of the trajectory of heat pumps, and we'll talk about that today. Also, the contractors asked for this, as well as distributors, in the interviews with the Colorado Energy Office, to develop a energy trends consumer flyer. It basically is a high-level review of what was presented during the BEL-CO meeting, and we'll talk about that and want to get the input from the group on that. Regulatory policy work that's coming here in 2022. The EAR score is one of the things that's top of mind with the manufacturers. And then the last piece is a call to action for how do we work together with the distributors, since they have been identified as one of the key levers in the supply chain that the contractors depend on to accelerate heat pump sales in the marketplace. With that, then we'll talk about next steps under each one, just those 4 pieces today, and then we'll close the meeting after that. Any questions or comments before I get started? And if you have comments, please feel free to put those into the chat box or questions. Really need to have as much participation, and I think we should probably talk about if any of these meetings need to be in person, if people want to do a hybrid. We're completely open to how we can be most effective in doing that. So this is just a slide giving a refresher of those topics and the links to the PowerPoints and the video presentations that were recorded, so that after this meeting you can look at those off of the slides when we send them out to you. So this is a working meeting today with those 4 topics that we talked about. The key purpose of today's meeting, when we talked about the benefits and what we're doing in the working groups, is looking at the resources and how to influence and collaborate to move the market and accelerate it. And the goal of our groups working together is to create a bigger piece of pie for all the energy efficiency industry. And specifically, what we're working on today focuses more on selling of heat pumps in the HVAC contractors world, and then how to take advantage of the trends to grow their bottom line. So the first project that we talked about is how do we work together to develop the forecast for the trajectory that's going to take in the next 10 years. So here's what we talked about in the last couple meetings, and presented and talked about quite a bit, but we are in stage 2 on the bottom of the hockey stick, which is typically used by startups. And also when I worked at Owens Corning, we also use the hockey stick pattern, hoping that when we launch a new product on the marketplace, that we were able to get everything to line up so we could hit that inflection point to increase and exponentially start increasing sales on the right side. So right now in stage 2, this is where we're mobilizing the supply chain, putting market development in place, and this groups are designed to do that. And then our goal is that by the time we get to 2024, 2025, the cities, as well as the state, as well as the utilities and the manufacturers, distributors, and contractors, we have a lot of pieces going so that they do have that impact where you get that inflection point and we go from 1 to 2 to 3% natural organic increase in heat pump sales up to Who knows, 10, 15% year over year. That would be fantastic. One of the pieces that was brought up to me after we talked about this forecasting hockey stick pattern is that even though we put percentages in there of what it would take to get the 2030 goals, if we look at current numbers, that we really need to know what the numbers are and what the influence is and the realities that's in the marketplace. I know when cities do a marketing campaign for heat pump rebates and they're giving additional rebates on top of the utility rebates, that type of thing. How do we look at that, develop metrics, a criteria, add real numbers to know that, do we need to increase to 200,000 heat pump installs by 2030? Or is it 1 million? Or is it 500,000? Putting percentages on there, if we don't know what our starting point, doesn't really tell us where the bar is. So this is one of the projects that we want to work on. In this group, I think we have to think about, how do we have input? Do we have a separate meeting for these 4 next projects that we work on with, whoever wants to come into those meetings? That's something that we have to decide. So I don't know if we want to go through the 4 projects here so that we can look at them and talk about them afterwards, next steps on how we want to tackle it. I've had strong interest from the manufacturers and some of the utilities to work on this. And I think I can talk about some of the criteria right now, but I think we're going to have to move into the next 3 projects and then come back to this. So the other project we have is developing this flyer that is meant for the dealer, for the contractor in working with the homeowner when they're in a sales call. And they had requested and said that their salesperson can sell the heat pumps when they get in the sales situation, but it's hard for them to get into the heat pump conversation and, tip that conversation where it feels valid, and that they've never heard the technology of heat pumps before, electrification that's happening. It's hard to show that there is an opportunity for the homeowner and how they operate their home and reduce their energy use and are more comfortable and those types of things. So the next slide is what we'd be reviewing. So we're working on putting a draft together. These are all the high level stats. It's basically the actions and the trends that are happening in the marketplace that are influencing all these goals to get to by 2030. And I reviewed these in the last meeting. So how do we put this into a 1-pager? And you guys gave feedback in our last meeting about how it's providing something to a homeowner is a different language than the technical language that's in these points that we made in the BEL-CO meeting, as well as it being an infographic, being interesting, having links to more information so it can be high level. So we're looking for a lot of feedback and direction from the contractor meeting and from the distributors and manufacturers and the utilities to work on this. And so we'll have a draft at the next meeting with the content in it and some ideas for us to put in front of everyone to start working on. The third project is the regulatory policy in 2022, and it's quite the lineup. Our theme for the quarterly membership meeting is Buckle Up for 2022. There's going to be a lot of decisions being made about where our industry is going, and the one initiative that has rose to the top that the manufacturers specifically have been talking about is the EAR score, the rating for heat pumps, and that the utilities all have different EER ratings, and it limits them from different products, and that they're able to get rebates for in the marketplace. And so what we'd like to do is put together the manufacturers EEBC. This is one of the main benefits of being a member of the EEBC, is to work with the different utilities to help influence their rebate levels and the market development that's necessary for our members to deliver those products and services, energy efficiency products and services in the marketplace. And so this is coming up because there are strategic issues, which is every 5 years, Xcel Energy develops the goals that are going to be in place for the DSM rebate plans for the next 5 years. There's also Xcel Energy also has their settlement process for the rebates called the DSM plan. Black Hills has to create. So basically, there's the 6 utility groups that deliver 91% of the energy in Colorado that are putting together their greenhouse gas plans. How do we, as a group, look at the pieces that are prohibiting and from accelerating, or even just to sell the heat pump equipment as it is today versus changes that are, need to be made. So with that, the quarterly membership meeting is this Thursday. It's from 7:30 to 9:30. And we're going to have speakers on both on Xcel, all of those processes and how the EEBC is going to participate. We'll be talking about a couple of the other utilities where they are, the legislation that's being proposed that also impacts a lot of the changes that are happening with our energy transition in Colorado, and also the federal legislation that is likely to go through right now, and what's in it, when to look for it, and how that's going to also impact us locally and where our businesses opportunities to stack rebates for your customers. And are there other initiatives that we need to be looking at from the HVAC heat pump side as well? The goal is that we want to have more of an informal communication with the utilities so that they consider what's coming, what's trending, what's emerging that needs to or could be looked at for the new rebate plans that are going to be coming out for 2023 and then 2024, versus waiting till we end up, they release the plan and then we're in a legal docket and putting in proposals. And so our goal is like, how do we come up with solutions and be more creative and collaborating so that we don't have to do that in a pressure cooker in the future. This is the recap that I just talked about, but understanding how to take advantage of what's coming, being informed, having that competitive advantage for your company by being in the EEBC, what's coming up with forecasting rules and regulations. And then I'd mentioned Xcel Energy has the 2020 strategic issues filing that's happening. And from that, those goals for beneficial electrification, gas and electric rebate programs will then be incorporated into the 2023 plan, which is likely an extension of the current 2020-21 plans. And then there'll be a probably 2024-25 plan. There's a lot for us to do, and your membership is super important for all of us to work together and influence the market for your businesses. And then the fourth project that has been identified by the group is having the manufacturers and the distributors meeting. So having the manufacturers meet with their own distributors, and can we identify 7 to 10 heat pump dealers who are already the first movers in the marketplace? They're the ones that are already installing the heat pumps currently. And how do we double their sales and focus on them, on their price points with the heat pump focus? What's missing in the trainings that they need? For instance, also in addition to the flyer for the trends that are happening in the marketplace that we were talking about for the dealers to deliver to their homeowners and sales environment, the Beneficial Electrification League is also working on what are the top 10 things that a homeowner needs to know when they get a heat pump to help reduce the risk for the contractor or the dealer in installing a heat pump and get less callbacks and that type of thing. So there's some really good stuff happening. This would be something that we'd work individually with the manufacturers and their distributors to then target contractors, bring them into the heat pump action group for the contractors to work on those items and give feedback, and also give input into policy and regulation and all those types of things. I'd like to remind everybody too, I talked about the EEBC is working on creating a pipeline of heat pump technicians that are trained and skilled, so that any of the contractors who are members of the heat pump action group will have access, kind of like first right of refusal to those graduates and those certified skilled heat pump installers. With that, we're at 3:30 right now. That is what's on the docket that for this group to work on. And so what I wanted to do is open it up and maybe take each one of those at a time and get feedback about interest and how we go about them. Not sure at this point if we should have breakout groups for each one of those projects, or if it's something that we can tackle in a group, but we'll have to have a lot of dialogue and interaction. And I feel like, when you get into these meetings on a Zoom call, it tends to be more presentation when the group gets too large. So with that, I'd like to see the whole screen. Does everyone need to see the slides, or do you feel like that we had enough overview that we'd be able to talk at each one of the projects separately? Feedback on that. Pete, were you going to speak up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I need to see both. I mean, that's something that we can definitely provide some feedback on, as far as, what the numbers, what we're seeing numbers wise, as far as growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's far bigger than what you're looking at right now.
I know. That's why I feel like we need to create a set point in the marketplace, especially for the stakeholders, to understand what it's going to take to get there. If it's a couple million heat pumps, that's a very different lift than thinking it's 200,000, which I think is just organically going to happen anyway, based on 2%. That is exactly why I think this has come up with the manufacturers in talking about how do we work on a forecast together. It can't be a forecast with pricing, in dollars in it. It's a forecasting on what is the potential of the market. I think that we have to look at, it has to get down in the weeds, and we're going to have to look at, when is each city doing a campaign? Is there an opportunity then to make a big push for contractors? There's different metrics that I've heard in a lot of the interviews and meetings that I've been in from, I think, I know, Anne, I saw that you're on the call. I thought that all the utilities would be tracking end of life units and then how many are rebated. And so I thought, oh, well, this is easy. If we know all the utilities know what their end of life, how many units are in their territory for AC and HVAC and, for a furnace, and then we would be able to know what the total turnover rate is, of equipment in each territory annually on average. And then looking at the actual forecasting with manufacturers and what's actually happening in the market. If we know that the utilities in total in Colorado are rebating 2,000 heat pumps, but we know there's 10,000 being sold annually, who are all the other contractors that aren't using rebates? It's quite involved, I think. But those are some of the metrics and criteria I've been hearing about. Any thoughts on that? I see Anne's percolating there.
I wish there was an easy answer to this, but there really isn't, because if you think about ACs and what we rebate compared to what we think is being sold in the market, we're a fraction, right? Just a fraction get rebated. And so it's come up in our, in our Beneficial Electrification League conversations as well, right? Is how do we track this, not just on a larger scale than just the utilities, what's really happening in the market? And I think can I pass the ball, right? I really think the manufacturers have the best access to the information, probably from AHRI would be my guess. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the manufacturers. I'm the distributor, but I think that data is available and it's out there. I can tell you just from a distribution standpoint that those numbers are eclipsing 70% in growth over the prior year in heat pumps. And that's just one product line that we have. So it's extensive, and it's way bigger than what we think it is, and we're expecting that growth to almost double in the next year. So
what values are you looking for from HRI? Residential, commercial, all heat pumps, specific heat pumps, capacities? Is there something specific you're looking for?
we'd like to know how, we're trying to gauge the market adoption, right? How fast are things is accelerating? So our focus to date has been on the residential side because we rolled out those rebates before the commercial side, but it's all going to be in play, right? We need to know all of it.
Yeah, and realize that this is not for the utilities, it is for you guys. So I think the thing that I worry about with this committee is that we need to realize this is the manufacturers and the distributors and the stakeholders committee, and that it's not to give information to utilities, it's to help you guys forecast and help us all then go to the cities and the other organizations, all the utilities in the state that are driving these goals, to say, you have these goals by 2030 to electrify your grid 80%. And heat pumps is a part of that story. And you're banking on X heat pumps being installed in the marketplace by 2030. What is that number? Like where we are today, what are we going to, where do we get to? And help put that wind in the sails of your contractors and you guys, your distributors and manufacturers, to collaborate. And that's part of the role of the EEBC, right? We create a platform for you guys to come together to have a stronger voice, to go, to the utilities and ask for changes and new rebates and standalone rebates and improvement on rebates, that type of thing. But we also do a lot of market development so that your contractors have what they need to install in the marketplace and utilize those rebates. But if they're hardly using them, then what needs to change in the rebates so that they're going to use them? And then if the reality is that the market needs to quadruple, a contractor needs to quadruple their business every year to get to 1 million installs a year, how many more contractors do you need to work with to engage them quicker? There's the first adopters, and everybody says, oh, it's the first adopters selling heat pumps right now. I'd hazard a guess it's the step before that. They're the inventors right now, right? They're the what do I say? They're the entrepreneurs that are doing it first. Then there's the first adopters. Then there's this, the second movers. And I think we have to be thinking about that hockey stick like that, and wrap our heads around those types of numbers and going, okay, City of Denver, if you want, and from the distributor's perspective, if you want me to engage my top 10 contractors, 3 times over, increase their business every year, you're going to have to do a statewide consumer campaign next year, because there's not enough movement in the market. Or does it mean each utility is doing their campaign and they're going to overlay their campaign, and then the manufacturers, distributors, and contractors overlay their campaign? We're going to have to get that organized to move the market, because it's not going to happen organically. I think that it seems like it's more of a tipping point right now than in the past, 3 years ago, for sure. That's just what I'm seeing. So that's why I think some of the manufacturers said we really need to forecast out what it's going to take and put numbers on that. So having the percentages on there, to know that you're going to have to increase in the marketplace 50-80% of the current sales where you're at now in the next 8 years. Is that even possible? If it's not possible, what would it take? And then communicating with all the other groups that influence those sales and can influence the sales, in addition to just the supply chain. That's a lot of information, but.
Well, and you asked a key question too. I mean, the question was, why are we not utilizing, or why are contractors not utilizing rebates as much as the data is showing? Because it's a lot more, obviously, than what we're seeing. So I think the contractor group should probably have a discussion in and around that topic. But I will tell you, what we're seeing is the driver is the consumer. The consumer is driving this back to the contractor, and the contractor is going, oh my God, I need to figure out how to do a heat pump, or I need to understand heat pumps, and so that's what's happening. And And so it's great because we're ready for that, and we have the technology behind that and the technical expertise to help them. But the key there is the percentages. They're growing exponentially. They're way beyond this. I mean, this is like, I mean, you could probably draw it straight up and you might get where we're at as far as that's concerned, because it's growing way faster than I think anybody ever predicted it was going to grow. But as far as the numbers are concerned, that's where that's coming from, that driver. And I think this comes back down to the marketing level too. And it's one of those things where, if we drive the market, we drive the consumer to want this, they're going to drive the contractor towards it. And that discussion then has to be between the contractor and the distributor manufacturer, so to speak. Hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is the kind of growth we've seen. This is the kind of growth that we need to predict going forward. That's where this comes in. That's where the communication needs to be. It's from that contractor to the distributor / manufacturer.
So how do we, at this point where we're at, knowing that we need to take a stab at a forecast like this, how do we do that as a group? Because I think right now, we have people coming into the meetings, but we've got to dive into this. Does that mean we really just need to say, hey, manufacturers and distributors and start there?
Yeah, I think that's where it needs
to not include the whole group for this project and get it started, and then roll that out to the stakeholders that are on these calls that are making these goals and saying, okay, this is the reality and the real numbers, guys, to get to that what you want in your business plans by 2030. What do we do?
That, in my opinion, that's what needs to happen. Is the two groups need to get together and go over this and go over their data and kind of put, hey, we're going to have to extrapolate, from the data. I think we can probably do that from that perspective. And the
Patricia.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, just kind of in looking at it, I see 3 or 4 different things that kind of factor into this. The data, AHRI does have data on sales in the state of Colorado. Okay, so that information, and it's available year over year. Now, there's been some fluctuations of product types that have kind of been added or not added or other things that way, but the data on the sales that have taken place in the state of Colorado, that AHRI does have information like that, and it's available. A second part of it is what is the combination of the existing building stock and the new construction that's going on. Right. Okay, those 2 items are going to identify what is that 100% level that we're dealing with, and then based on what's being sold, we've got an idea of where we are from the percentage point as far as where we are year over year and what the expectations would need to be in order to hit the double-digit growth levels that are shown on the hockey stick there. The other thing looking about, I know Ann had talked about that the rebates that are being done are only a fraction of what are being sold. And I think some of that is related to that the rebates are being offered for specific levels of operation and efficiency of the product. And so there may be a lot of minimum efficiency or slightly higher than minimum efficiency, but not high enough to get the rebate products that are being sold. And so that could account for some of the differences between the number of units that are being sold in the state versus the number of rebates that are being addressed through the utilities. So, understanding all of those areas will make it easier to start looking at, okay, if we're going to then start looking at 10%, just to pick an arbitrary number, annual growth, then that lets manufacturers know, okay, what types of volumes are we looking for, but then they also need to determine what are the efficiency levels. All the manufacturers have different bells and whistles, they have different models, they have different efficiencies, and so it's kind of where do we as manufacturers kind of get that information. Again, I don't have the answers to all of that, but I think there is a lot of that information that is out there to help manufacturers get an idea on the numbers. Then it becomes more granular of working with the sales folks and the local distribution and dealers to figure out, okay, exactly which models are going to happen moving forward. So that's just kind of a couple things I'm looking at or thinking about just in regards to this particular first objective or initiative.
Now that's super helpful. Does that mean that we should focus on maybe getting the manufacturer members together to focus on that first before we bring in distributors or anybody else? And then bring in, if we need data from, utilities, but at least get our arms around that piece and then start bringing in the others to complete the picture. Is that?
I would think that your manufacturers in a whole are going to be reluctant to provide sales information to a particular area unless it is, call it hidden, where an AHRI can provide that information. And so personally, I would think that that would be a better first stop to find out what are the sales in Colorado, would be through AHRI. But then when you get to what is the building stock and things like that, manufacturers aren't going to be able to provide you that information. That may be easier coming from the utilities between, and part of that may also be identifying, okay, what of the building stock that's out there, how much of the building stock is done with gas heat? How much is done with heat pumps? How much is done with oil? How much is done with wood? Whatever, and whether it's natural gas or propane, just trying to understand maybe of what some of those things are. And then that may also help provide some direction to manufacturers on some, where would be a good direction to start going. If you have a map of Colorado and it kind of says, hey, there's a high preponderance of natural gas in these areas, or a high preponderance of propane in these areas, or wood, or whatever the other source may be, then maybe manufacturers, or in conjunction with your group, that maybe we can develop some type of information packets to go to those specific needs to try to make some inroads to it. And I know that's the number 2 initiative, and I've got some other comments and things on that, but just on where we are here, I think HRI is the first place to start, where you can get sales data that's representative of what's being sold into Colorado. Again, I don't think manufacturers are going to give you that information individually.
Yeah, and we have to be careful about that. The only thing that we can share in the EEBC, I mean, we do this all the time, is aggregated information. We can't share individual information, and I don't think we should be talking about sales numbers exactly anyway, but there has to be some form of it to figure this out. And I know that in talking with manufacturers, everybody's always estimating what the total market is as well. And I think there's some of that portion that is helpful as well. But great feedback on that. Mm-hmm.
This is Matt Baker with Daikin. So one other area that we have, DOE just recently released an incredible data set on building stock in the U.S. Updated, brand new data set that gets to a lot of this as well. What is the source fuel for heating? Even gets into things like water heating and cooking and all those sorts of things. There are some amazing online tools that allow you to dig in regionally and understand what existing building stock looks like. So that may be another valuable resource to utilize in this effort.
Great feedback. I think that's part of the value of us all working together, is everybody has different resources, right, that we can pool to start putting that picture together. For sure.
So I'm going to make a politically dangerous statement for what it's worth. Xcel Energy has some home use, we call it a home use study, information about our customers and our kind of what they're using in homes that we use to, in a variety of ways, try to know our customers better, understand what their motivations are, understand that, the age of home stock and all those things. So we have some of that data that's available, that's outside of the AHRI part. If we want to put our heads together and kind of pull out some of the more salient information to share, we could do that. If it benefits us all, why wouldn't we? Right.
Right. And then we probably should be asking the other utilities and state to do the same. I think there's like a basic data set of, that covers all the different markets that is going to be helpful with that kind of information.
Yeah. To Robert's point about the
any other comments? We're at like 10 minutes before, and I'm wondering if we need to go through each one of these areas. How soon do we want to schedule the next meeting is my question, because we have 10 minutes left. We'll finish talking about this. But I think this is a biggie. And this was, out of the 4 things we talked about, this was prioritized as the most important from the manufacturers in our membership that I talked to. So I wanted to take a temperature check from everyone. If out of the 4 priorities that have rose to the top, is this the number one for this group to work on? Regardless, we are going to be working on all of the regulatory affairs stuff happening this year, next year. Anyway, that's what the EEBC does. So that's happening no matter what. So there's this and the other 2. I actually think they have to happen in tandem, but any feedback on that? So we have the forecast that we're talking about, number 1. Number 2 is the consumer trends flyer, which really is highly focused on the contractors because they're the ones that need to give the feedback the most to get that right. As Anne has said before, flyers are tricky. And then the regulatory policy work, that's the EER score that we're going to be working on anyway.
Well, 3 will definitely influence number 1.
Yes, exactly. That's a huge one. So they're almost interrelated, right? So it's what's the trajectory without the EER score changes, and what is it with those changes so that all of your equipment is eligible for rebates? And then the designing, and really the 4th one is manufacturers, us coordinating, working with your distributors, and the distributors, let's say, okay, let's identify the top heat pump dealers, the dealers who are selling heat pumps the most in everyone's market, and then what do they need to help them accelerate their sales? What are they missing? Is there training holes? Because we have this whole group, we have the whole beneficial electrification league with the cities and the utilities. We have a lot of people sitting there saying, tell us what you need, and we'll try to find it. And how do we work together to get that from what needs to be filled in that the manufacturers aren't doing? So in looking at those 4, they're all in play right now except for number 4 through the EEBC.
Yeah, this is Robert again. I think the number 2, the flyer is important. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that are going on, and again, I mean, in some of these things, you can probably take advantage of a lot of work that AHRI has been doing. Mm-hmm. Again, one of the things that's going to come into play, and I had HVAC contractors to my house last week doing just some start of the year maintenance and review, and they were talking about the new refrigerants that are coming, and they didn't like them, and they don't know anything. They really just didn't understand what's going on with that. So there's been a lot of work that AHRI has been doing. AHRI is putting together a bunch of one-pagers on various things relating to the new refrigerants, storage of refrigerants in warehouses and small dealers warehousing. There's going to be another one for transportation of refrigerants. There's going to be it for warehousing finished product that have A2L refrigerants in it, and what the limitations and the regulations and things are for all of that. And so I think a lot of that you could probably do by doing a QR code on one-pagers that would send somebody to a website like AHRI, the Safe Refrigerant Transition Task Force website, that would have just all kinds of information. But the new refrigerants are going to be one of the things that are going to be related to this. That is, as the industry is moving to the low GWP refrigerants, those are going to be questions that the dealers are going to have, particularly those that are just not familiar with it, or if they're starting to get their feet wet and starting to be looking at heat pumps. These are things that they don't know right now, and unfortunately, fear spreads faster than truth. And so making sure that the right information and things are available, and that there are places to get questions answered, is really, really going to go ahead and help. So I think there's a lot of work that's been done there. And so if there's a way of tapping into that, like I said, QR codes that would direct them to websites with information and things like that, that could really be a big part of that number 2 part of going to the dealers. Not so much to the consumers. If we can educate the dealers and distributors, then as they're talking to the consumers, then they would have the information and can share the information, and or share the websites if the consumer wants to do a digger deep dive into information that's out there. So I think that's going to be a huge part of that.
Well, and that's part of, I think what happens is we all think, well, the manufacturers are providing all that already, right? Do we need to do that? Like, we're filling in, but it sounds like having access and just even having the list of where to find everything is a challenge for everybody.
Correct. And that one of the things that I think is really important of taking advantage of HRI, that they have working groups that include all of their member manufacturers that are coming up with these documents and reviewing these documents and providing just to the nth degree of feedback until they come to a consensus. It may not be perfect, but at least it's a point that has got consensus of the manufacturers that are involved in that. I guess there's no better way of getting that information out to the field as something that's consistent no matter what the manufacturer is. And so that's the learning part that goes on. That the individual manufacturer products and the way they function, everything else, well, that's what differentiates manufacturers A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. But all of the common information, we want to make sure that that information is disseminated, and that everybody hears the same story and everybody hears the right story.
I think that's great feedback for the BEL-CO group too, for the Beneficial Electrification League, because there's the utilities and cities in there, and that meet. And I think as a group, we've been surprised how many resources that have been uncovered just when we all share, what everybody has access to find all those common things. So it sounds very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, HRI is putting all of these documents together in support of the AHR show, end of January, beginning of February. And they're going to have those for handing out at the AHRI. We'll have a booth, and they'll be handing out information about that. And it's all eventually going to be posted on AHRI website somewhere. Don't know where at this point. But being able to get access to all of that information, this is again, part of the reason why all this information is being put together, to be able to get it out on the hands of the people that have the questions so that they can learn and then move forward without that being a contentious issue.
Which holds them back from wanting to sell more heat pumps if they're unsure.
Absolutely.
Great. So with that, I know we're at the top of the hour. How soon should we schedule our next meeting? And I'm thinking I'm going to schedule some separate ones for maybe some of the key groups. Do you guys want to meet in the very beginning of the new year, the first or second week, and pick a similar time?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Me too.
Yeah. Okay.
Second week, maybe. Yeah.
The second week. Do you want to pick a regular time? Right now we've been doing like that end of the day, 3 o'clock. Does that work for everyone? And do we want to pick, today's Tuesday. Do we want to stick with a Tuesday? Tuesday, 3 o'clock. All right, we'll make that a standard. So we'll look at the second week then in January. So that would be the 11th at 3 o'clock. Great. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have anything else, a lot of times we say if you want to sit and chat afterwards and do kind of an informal conversation, I typically do that for 15, 20 minutes afterwards. I can't do it today. We'll put that, we'll send out a meeting notice to everybody, and super appreciate your feedback today. Our focus is here in Colorado and how do we move the ticker for everybody. So any other comments before we go?
Thanks so much, Patricia.
You bet. All right. Thank you, everyone. Super appreciate it.
I see y'all. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.